A New Jersey couple discovers their 1805 home is not just a run-of-the-mill historic structure. A former owner's hobby turns a 19th century Illinois house into a Hollywood Hall of Fame. And in Washington State, the architect of a 1902 American Foursquare leaves behind handwritten clues to his designing handiwork. These stories and more, if walls could talk. Hello, I'm Grant Goodeve. Welcome to If Walls Could Talk. In 1997, Henry and Sue Capro shocked their friends and family when they suddenly changed their plans to buy a bed and breakfast and bought a 19th century grist mill instead. The Capros weren't interested in making flour. They were interested in preserving a piece of Glenwood, New Jersey's past and making the mill their home. But while cleaning out debris from the mill's fourth floor, Henry and Sue were surprised to find evidence that they weren't the first couple to call the old mill home. Putting their noses to the grindstone took on new meaning when Henry and Sue Capro decided to buy a forgotten mill in Glenwood, New Jersey.
I knew basically from Henry's face that when he walked in, this was it, this was home, and it is home.
But they had no idea how much work it would take to make it a home, or how much history they would uncover.
You go and you buy the building, and immediately thereafter, the building owns you. The building has its own life. It's telling you where it wants to go and what it needs to do.
Cleaning the place up was the first thing that needed doing.
We used 12 30-yard dumpsters just to clean out some of the debris that was in here. But in the process, we wound up finding a lot of things in the mill that actually did have historic benefit to them and went back all the way into the mid-1800s.
What they discovered was a family history that stretched as far back as the stream that powered the mill.
The fourth floor was a treasure trove of artifacts that are pictures, articles, and clothing.
What piqued their curiosity the most was a newspaper article which revealed that Daniel Bailey, one of Glenwood's early movers and shakers, purchased the mill in 1888.
He built the railroad and the telegraph line into Glenwood. He then went into the dairy business and the creamery business and the peach business and the granite business.
This master of many trades was Captain Bailey, who was a former artillery captain in the Civil War. The captain bought the mill because he wanted to reclaim all the land his great-grandfather owned in the early 1800s. But it wasn't enough for Captain Bailey to own the land. He wanted the mill to be the best mill around. So he brought in state-of-the-art equipment.
That equipment cost him $30,000, which in 1888 was a lot of money, and from what we're told, his wife never really got over the fact that he spent $30,000 to make a mill. But it operated from 1888 until the end of World War I.
In honor of all the history they found lying around, Henry and Sue have kept much of it on the property, incorporating grinding stones into their landscape and machine parts into their home. For instance, this contraption is now a headboard.
This is the last two in a series of 5 machines built by the George T. Smith Company in Jackson, Michigan. These machines would take the grain after it had been ground, dropped to the basement, lifted to the top floor in an elevator, and then start processing through these machines. The lowest one in the section here is called a flour dressing machine, and that would take the final process and make it into fine white flour.
The couple found big equipment and smaller tools of the trade as well.
This is a grain shovel, and it's made out of wood. The reason it's made out of wood is so that it would create no sparks within the mill. So the grain would be shoveled into a hopper, hopefully not creating anything that would be combustible.
As Henry and Sue sifted through the mill's artifacts, They were startled to find photos which showed another couple had lived here before them. Pictures and newspaper articles revealed a watershed discovery. It turns out that Captain Bailey's grandson purchased the mill in 1941. Just as his grandfather had done before him, Dan Van Duzer wanted to hang on to his family's legacy. But it didn't come easy, as a family letter discovered in the mill reveals.
And these are dated in 1938, and one aunt is writing to the other. Of course, Aunt May said, Dan will put too much money into the mill, or he will leave it unfinished. And I said, that's not for us to decide. Dan is a mature, intelligent individual, aged 35 years. And he and Ethel yearn for a little house in Glenwood, in addition for Dan to have his shop.
It took 3 years, but Dan and his wife Ethel finally convinced the family that they deserved the mill. They bought it from the estate and turned it into a summer home. Not only do old photographs show that Dan and Ethel loved the place, but when the Capros learned Ethel was still alive, they learned firsthand how much the mill meant to her and her husband.
She has a wonderful long-term memory, better than mine. And she can go right back to the 19-teens and tell you exactly what was happening in Glenwood and at the mill at that time.
All these wonderful discoveries have made this place much more than a run-of-the-mill house.
It was such a sound structure that we just wanted to live here, to keep it. It is a part of history.
We hope that it'll stand another 200 or 400 years, and that folks long after us will be able to come back and see how things were done in the early 1800s through the early 1900s.
Henry and Sue feel they are an integral part of the mill, an important cog in the mill's preservation. It's a history they hope will continue turning long after their time at the mill has passed. Henry and Sue learned about one of Ethel Van Duzer's unusual hobbies when they discovered a collection of strange-looking dolls packed inside an old trunk. The Capros wondered why someone would save dolls with mismatched body parts and clothes made from old scraps. An article they later found in the house provided the answer. When Ethel lived here, she began salvaging dolls and doll parts that washed down to the brook during floods. The newspaper article was about Ethel's growing collection of lost dolls, which she called Brook Babies. When we come back, famous faces discovered inside a 19th century Queen Anne help an Illinois couple go behind the scenes of their home's history. There's more to hear if walls could talk.